GamingBolt presents the 15 best PS2 games of all time. The PlayStation 2 really flipped the gaming industry on its head when it came down to memorable games. There were just so many games released on it that latched onto gamers like leeches. These games stand out in many gamers' minds as some of the best games to ever grace their console. With that out of the way, sit back and enjoy our picks for the 15 best PS2 games of all time. Before we move ahead though, we'd like to point out that the PS2 had an insane library of games, so your favorite games might not be on this list. After all, this is our opinion, so please do keep that in mind. Twisted Metal Black. When you think of vehicular combat games, a standout franchise will probably be the Twisted Metal series. Twisted Metal Black was the 5th game in the franchise and the first game on the PS2 of the series, and it really made its mark and utilized the better graphics capability on the console. The player chooses from a total of 10 characters from the get-go, then they play through their own different stories and use their own unique vehicles, and later you can unlock extra characters. The game received critical acclaim for the unlockable content and the varying storylines of all of the characters. Final Fantasy X. You'd be hard-pressed to find a gamer who hasn't heard of this franchise, and for good reason. Final Fantasy is a fantasy-based RPG series with a lot of bizarre monsters within its games. 2001's Final Fantasy X was the first game in the series to make the jump to the PlayStation 2, and it was successful, garnering praise for its voice acting, character development, and graphics, which was altered to be more to scale and less of a top-down view. The combat was also subject to praise as the developers revised the battle and summon system and allowed the player to swap characters mid-fight. VIRTUA Fighter 4. VIRTUA Fighter 4 was originally released for arcade machines, but made its way to the PS2 a year later. The 4th installment was different than the others as it boasted a more user-friendly UI and new and revamped techniques. It also went through various versions, including VIRTUA Fighter 4 Evolution, which included the ability to customize your character, improved graphics, a currency system in the quest mode, and much more. Ico. One massive improvement that the PS2 had over its precursor was just how beautiful you could make a game. Ico didn't try to tell the story through dialogue, rather letting the player enjoy the gameplay and make your way through a castle solving puzzles and trying to find a way out with a spectral being named Yorda. The game was praised for the graphics and the sound design. This game set in stone the quality Team Ico strives for with each release. Shadow of the Colossus. Shadow of the Colossus was one of the greats when it came down to talking about visually stunning PS2 games. For Team Ico, this was debatably a step up in quality compared to their debut game, Ico. Shadow of the Colossus had the player take control of Wander, a boy who found himself doing whatever it takes to bring back a girl named Mono. This led to the player having to slay 16 different colossi as part of a deal with a mysterious being known as Dorman. The game was beloved by many because of its stunning visuals, soundtrack, and immersion. SOULCALIBUR 2. SOULCALIBUR 2 improved on its precursor while retaining its weapon-based combat. The game was also jaw-dropping for the era. It had a high production value and in turn, it was way more polished than most other PlayStation 2 games. It wasn't just the graphics that people loved though. The game also introduced arenas having walls, meaning that some areas you couldn't just win by knocking your opponent out of the arena. It was also beloved because of the beautiful music featured within the game. SSX3. SSX3 was critically acclaimed for its better graphics from its precursors, the tricks you could pull off, the amazing soundtrack, and the openness of the world. It was also a big seller, selling around 1 million copies, which was a first for the franchise. There was also local and online multiplayer where you could compete against your friends. This was also a first for the series as well. OKAMI. If you enjoy games that are visually stunning, you may have heard of OKAMI. This game was made in a style reminiscent of an oil painting, making it stand out compared to other games of the era. The game follows OKAMI, who picked a white wolf as her form. After being locked up for 100 years, an ancient evil was released to corrupt the world, and it's up to you to protect everyone. The game's story is fairly linear, but it holds a lot of side quests and events to complete. People praised the game for its wonderful design, immersion, and soundtrack. BURNOUT 3 TAKEDOWN. The PS2 really improved the racing game genre, mostly due to the improved graphics and larger game capacity, allowing for more detail, longer races, and more content as a whole. BURNOUT 3 TAKEDOWN was one such game that received critical acclaim. The game was fast-paced and dangerous, leaving a lot of other racing games, for lack of a better term, in the dust. It was praised by critics and fans for its aggressive racing style, its visuals, and its gameplay, which made players come back for more. The game garnered enough of a reputation to become known as one of the best games to come out on the PlayStation 2. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3. Anyone who had even a vague interest in skateboarding, but not the drive to learn how, probably played at least one of the Tony Hawk Pro Skater games in their life. This game was the epitome of epic at the time, allowing the player to grind, ollie, and produce hidden combos for an amazing score. It was also the first game to utilize online multiplayer in the franchise, allowing the player to compete with others to see who gets the best score. Gran Turismo 3 A-SPEC. When it comes to racing games, a commonly talked about franchise would be the Gran Turismo series. With its third installment, Gran Turismo 3 A-SPEC, it made the leap to the PS2 and successfully brought this classic, genre-defining franchise onto the next generation of consoles. The game was just about you racing, completing championships, finishing license tests, and collecting the vast number of cars you can acquire. The game had even become one of the highest-rated racing games of all time. Resident Evil 4. Resident Evil 4 is considered to be one of the best games in the franchise. The game has a variety of enemies, immersive gameplay, and some of the best music in the series. The game had the player take control of Leon Kennedy, a former police officer turned special agent who was tasked to rescue the president's daughter. Resident Evil 4 managed to combine action shooters and horror all in one nice package. It was critically acclaimed for a number of reasons, such as its immersive gameplay, good voice acting, and the well-done cutscenes. God of War 2. If you were a PS2 owner, which I'll assume you are if you're this deep into this countdown, you have probably played or at least heard of the God of War series. The game featured a lot of gory hack-and-slash action along with some mentally stimulating puzzles. The game has the player take control of Kratos. After the events of the first game, Kratos decided to join the Spartan army to attack Rhodes. During the attack, a massive eagle drained his powers, and then the rest went to Zeus, who turned out to be the main antagonist. The game was regarded as one of the best games released on the console. Alongside that title, it was also thought to be one of the best action games of all time. Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. We all knew at least one GTA game was going to be on here, and our pick was, of course, Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. The game was just like any other GTA game, letting the player roam around the surrounding districts, with the player stealing cars and murdering random people. There is a story, which is mandatory to unlock different districts of Los Santos. The game follows the story of Carl Johnson, a former gang member after coming back in the wake of hearing of his mother's death by a drive-by shooting. It was loved because of the map size, the great voice acting, and the story. The game also became a commercial success, selling over 12 million units by 2005 on just the PS2. This put it as the #1 game on the PlayStation 2. Metal Gear Solid 2: Sons of Liberty. It's fairly obvious that the Metal Gear franchise was one of the greats when it came down to the PlayStation 2. It never shied away from improving or adding something to push the limits of the console. Metal Gear Solid 2: Sons of Liberty focused on stealth, even taking into consideration the flooring that makes noise if you move too fast, and it also lets you blind opponents with steam. The game was critically acclaimed for its stealth gameplay and its improvements from the previous games. The game had quickly become popular, and in a mere 5 days it sold around 680,000 units in the US. And that about does it for this video. If you enjoyed what you watched and want to see more from GamingBolt, you can always hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell icon next to it. That way you will never miss any of our videos.